shorty and she doesn't want no slow song. Had a man last year, life goes on. Haven't let the thing loose, girl, in so long. You been inside, know you like to lay low. I've been peeping what you bringing to the table. Working hard, girl, everything paid for. First, last phone bill, car, no cable. With your phone now, gotta hit them angles. With your phone now, snap it like you faithful.
Todos están pendientes a ti, pero tú puesta pa' mí, haciendo que me odien más, porque todos te quieren probar. Lo que no saben es que no te dejas llevar de cualquiera, y todos te quieren probar. Lo que no saben es que hoy yo te voy a buscar. Dile que tú eres mía, mía, tú sabes que eres mía, mía. Tú misma lo decías cuando yo te lo hacía.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We want to welcome you to our webinar, Achieving Equity in STEM Through Authentic Assessment. We are going to have a wonderful opportunity today to connect and have a wonderful conversation. I want to start off quickly by introducing and first of all, thanking Dr. Rabu Rubalcaba for the DJing skills here. You know, it's always fun. We're in a lot of webinars almost every day of the week. I don't know if you guys are in the same situation, but it's really nice to hear some music and to get a different feel when you're in a webinar, kind of just relax and enjoy the music. So thank you for that. I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Jessica Hurtado, and I'm the Program Supervisor for Student Experience with the California Virtual Campus Online Education Initiative, or CVC OEI. I'd like to also introduce my two colleagues from CVC OEI. Karen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Karen will be helping us with all the back end. Any questions, if you have any sound issues or anything like that, you can put those in the chat. Any questions that might come up or any concerns, you know, with the technology that you might be having, feel free to include those questions in the chat. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There are two options on your Zoom panel. If you put your cursor over the screen, you can also see the different options that you have there for chat and Q&As. So please make sure that you use both of those features. The chat section will be to offer any questions or any comments or any you know, specific individual concerns that you might be having, or opportunity to introduce yourselves to the audience. And then the Q&A will be specifically for the questions for our panelists, for our team that are presenting the content of the webinar today. And then I also want to introduce my colleague, Arnita Porter. Arnita, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, sure. I'm Arnita Porter, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be sharing today and our wonderful panelists. I am with CVC OEI in the Student Experience Division. I serve as the Equity Specialist, and I'm also faculty in the Los Angeles Community College District and Mount San Jacinto. So I'm really excited about being in community with everyone today.
Thank you. So quickly, we'll go over the agenda. We'll start off, like I said, we'll have welcome and introductions. We'll have faculty introductions. Then we'll dive into faculty presentations. We'll have a quick activity for our audience here today. And then we'll dive into CVC and @ONE resources. And then we will reserve some time towards the end for the wonderful Q&As. And then last, we'll dive into the next steps, a quick survey, and of course, appreciation for all and everyone who's participating today. And then I'll hand it over to Arnita, if you want to talk a little bit about our goals today.
Sure. Well, just to put everything in context, we know that authentic assessments help to increase students' critical thinking, as well as improve engagement and allow us to measure their knowledge and skills. But we also know that using equity-based authentic assessments reflects our commitment to student-centered learning and provides students with opportunities to share and apply what they've learned and connect with their learning on a deeper level. So with that in mind, our goals today, we're going to discuss the importance of developing authentic assessments for online learning in STEM. We're also going to share information, tools, and strategies to help build capacity for creating equity-based authentic assessments. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're supporting you all, STEM educators, in your daily practice by creating this space to share your knowledge, challenges, expertise, and successes. And we have 3 distinguished panelists who will do just that. They will share information with us as to how they use authentic assessments and how they make equity visible in STEM. So our wonderful panelist, I'm going to start with Dr. Larry Green. He is from Lake Tahoe Community College. Dr. Green is a professor of math, and I want to make sure I highlight everyone's commitment to equity in STEM. And so, for instance, with Larry, his commitment to equity in STEM is demonstrated through the work he's doing as the grant director for Zero Textbook Costs, as well as open educational resources. He serves as a consultant for the Eliminating Equity Gaps in Online STEM Courses through the Humanized Online Teaching Grant, and he's also a team member of the Adaptive Learning for General Chemistry California project. Great thing about Larry also is that he has over 1,000 subscribers and over 1 million views on his YouTube channel. So make sure you check it out. We have a link to his YouTube channel in the, as you can see here, and this will be available to you all afterwards. Larry is also a great outdoorsman, and he loves the forest. Now, if we can move on to Dr. Jennifer Cole, who is a fellow colleague of mine at West Los Angeles College, go West. Dr. Jennifer Cole is an assistant professor of earth science, climate change, and environmental studies chair. She is an interdisciplinary scientist with research interest in geology, geochemistry, and archaeology. She teaches earth science, environmental science, geography, and oceanography. Now, Jennifer's commitment to equity in STEM is demonstrated through her sustainability efforts in our district, Los Angeles Community College District, where she has helped to create the first climate change and environmental studies AA degree in the nation, and it is at West. And this focuses on the causes of climate change and impacts to the environment and human society. Jennifer wants to make sure that all students see themselves as scientists, and she wants to help them reclaim their innate curiosity about the natural world. She's also the Academic Senate Vice President at West. So again, welcome, Dr. Jennifer Cole. And now we'll move on to Dr. Rob, who happens to also be our resident DJ. Shout out for those for breaking, things out with Lauren. Really appreciate that. So Dr. Rob Rubalcaba is at San Diego City College. He is the associate professor of math, and his commitment to equity in STEM includes co-teaching Umoja, also co-organizing math and writing jams. He also brings not only his joy of music, but he breaks down learning barriers as a way of helping students to learn. Dr. Rob is also a board member of Pillars of the Community, which is a social justice-based organization that focuses on self-liberation and community building in Southeast San Diego. His math jams are legendary, as well as his commitment to his students, sometimes having office hours that are 10 hours long. I mean, he really goes above and beyond. And that's the wonderful thing that is the through line with each of the presenters. They all have a deep commitment to our students, their learning, their success, and they also have a love for our students, which we know that when we create environments that are conducive to learning, our students thrive and succeed. So That being said, I think we are on track to have our 3 illustrious panelists present their information.
Yes. So at this moment, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Larry Green.
Just one second. Let me share screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about the different kinds of assessments and how to make sure that all of our students can get through them. If they've done the work and learned the material, we want to make sure that they can succeed. So the first kind of assessment I'm going to talk about are formative assessments. Those are like the daily homework, other practice work, kind of low stakes, but really important for learning. So without equity in mind, the way almost everyone did it, say 7 or 8 years ago, and actually a lot of them still now, is you just use a publisher system. Very easy. All you have to do is pop it in. It's linked to the textbook. You just, for the instructor, kick back. And that's the way most people do assessments when it comes to the just basic homework assessments. But there's a problem. And that is, I was getting all kinds of students to say, I just can't afford it. I can't pay the $120. My financial aid check is not going to come by the time, I must have it. So what do I do? And in the old days, I'd have to say, sorry, but you got to do the homework, and this is where the homework system is. It's mandatory. No matter how much I hated doing that, I had to. So what happened? The student drops, disappears. And what we end up with is equity issues. So we end up with the privileged can get their degree, and those who are not privileged, they drop out, usually quietly, you never hear from them again. I'm not okay with that. To me, that is not equity-minded. That's not supporting all of our students. So instead, what I did is I said, we need to do something different. So with equity in mind, what I did is I moved into MyOpenMath, which for MyOpenMath, it's a free homework system, and anybody can use it. It is OER. You can do anything you want with it at no cost. So the nice thing is just about every math class has a MyOpenMath course associated with it. And so do a lot of science courses. I know physics has a bunch, chemistry has some. So it's there for us. It's customizable. So if you copy a course and then say, well, I like most of it, but not this section, you just get rid of that section. Okay, you can change what you want. Okay, there's a bit of a learning curve to change the real fancy stuff. But the great thing is there's actually tens of thousands of math questions written into my MyOpenMath from all the different subjects. So I just go and search whatever I'm looking for, and I just look, and there's usually 100 different types of questions that address what I want to address, and I just grab them. It's really easy. And I happen to be a coder. So since I'm a coder, I can customize them any way I want. If you're not a coder, you can slightly customize them. But mostly you don't need to, because so many problems are written, and if you don't have one that you don't like, that you want, you just ask and someone will write it for you. It also LTIs into Canvas. So when my students use this, they're in Canvas and they click on the homework. They don't even know they're MyOpenMath. They think they're staying in Canvas. There's nothing to do. Of course, they have to do the math, but there's nothing to do in terms of trying to figure out how to deal with the system. They just work on the problems. And the result is that all students can get their degree. Instead of the privileged to graduate and those who are not privileged are stuck and drop out, it's not that way anymore. Now, those who study and learn all graduate, okay? And that's great. Okay, no matter what their background is, even if they're homeless, whatever they are, they can make it work. I had a grant called a ZTC grant, Zero Textbook Cost Grant. And we made sure that we linked all of the OpenStax books, because those are free supported books, to the map. And then we did some others too. So there's no cost for the book. There's no cost for the homework system. And I have been able to convince my entire math department to go with zero cost for every single math class, every single section that we offer at Lake Tahoe Community College. And it doesn't end there. Because we had people from all over the state work on this, it's been spreading. And when I go editing a problem, it says, danger, there are 5,000 different sections using this. Literally, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of students now using what our team has created for free for students. What we created was OER. You can do whatever you want with it. So you can customize it for your class, and that's important. And we kept equity in mind as we were developing it. And I'll show you how that works. So here's the old style. Okay, John is a lifeguard and spots a drowning child 30 meters along the shore and 40 meters from the shore, et cetera, et cetera. That can be the whole thing. I don't have that much time. The problem with this is, well, now we're always using the name John, and that may not be the best thing to do because, again, I want to keep equity in mind. I want to make sure that we represent our students. So one way of fixing it is to change John to Juan. Well, that sounds good, except not all our students are Juans either. So I'm one to not compromise. I want to make it work, and I want to be right. So what I did is I talked to David Littman, who created the MyOpenMath, and he was able to create a database of names that are our students' names, the ones that they're used to hearing, okay, throughout the West Coast, it turns out. And instead, the problem now states $name is a lifeguard. This is not what the student sees. $name is a random variable so that every time a student opens up this question and looks at it, even if they try it again or if a different student looks at it, it gives a name that represents our areas. So it's not just Juan and John, it's also Maria or Cheng Ho or whatever it might be. It's very equity minded, and they're going to get that feeling of our college, our community is not just one race, but we have equity and we understand that we're a community. That's what this is about. And then I also put in $L for meters of in terms of how far, and then $H. All these dollar signs are random numbers. So that means a student who maybe doesn't get it the first time because maybe their background is not the best, they can try it over and over and over again. And each time they'll get for different numbers, same ideas, different names, and they'll be able to work on this problem. And that's kind of how we thought about this. And we tried to make sure that as we were creating these courses, we kept equity in mind. So then there's computers. So there's some problems. Well, not all students have access to a computer. And I'm sure your colleges are all the same. We're closed. You cannot come to our college. You can go to our parking lot. You can go to our beautiful forest next to it, but you can't go inside. So we have to do everything online. So everything is online, which you worry about. What about the students that don't have a computer? Well, the good news is even if they don't have a computer and even if they don't have internet, here's our solution. So a couple years ago, I wrote a foundation grant. This is before COVID, saying, look, we have students that are low income. We want to make sure this works for them. And actually, I did this when I was on the school board. I made sure every K through 12 student was given a computer from the district. And then I was able to bring it forward to our college. And they're Chromebooks. They're cheap, but they work great. So every student who needs a computer gets a computer. We also have internet hubs. So they can go to the parking lot. Parking lot's open at least. You can't go inside the campus, and they can get online. But the good thing about Tahoe, we're a small town. So if they don't have it at home, there are lots of places they can get online. But most people have it. But again, everyone can get online if they need. So the nice thing is, since that time that we made this happen, I never get complaints with students that I don't have a computer, I can't, do the homework or whatever, because we made sure that every student had access. And that is important, especially if everyone's online. They have to have a computer. It has to be pretty easy for them. So then there's summative assessments. Summative assessments, those are the tests. Those are exams. Those are the high stakes stuff where the grade depends on it. Not just learning, but the grade itself. So there's challenges, lots of challenges. So if you think about giving a regular exam, if it's not proctored, students are going to cheat. And the worst part about this, to me, is that the wealthy kids can pay someone to do their exam for them. Okay? Even the non-wealthy can ask about it. I get, check this out, I get an email at least one a day from a student somewhere in the world, not one of my students, saying, can you do these problems for me? And I look at it, and it's clearly a test. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But there's like Chegg where they can just pay someone to do it. So the rich people get to test, get the free test. And to me, that's an issue. So that's a problem. There's lots of problems. Another big problem is stress. And students have a lot of stress when they're taking tests. So it's a horrible problem. And there's lots and lots of other challenges. I don't have time to go through them because I only get 15 minutes. So another choice is to do projects-based learning instead. They have challenges also. And one is it's really hard to make projects address all of the student learning outcomes that you want and all the content that you want in the class. It's tough. I don't have solutions to everything, but I do my best. Another is plagiarism. So we have plagiarism, and again, you can pay to have someone do a project done. I've seen that. It's depressing. Again, I don't have a perfect solution, but I'll talk about some of the things I've done. So first is I try and make assessments authentic, so they can't use some project that was done 2 years ago from some other country or state. So here's an example, and this is where you make authentic assessments. So let y equals f of x represent the path of Trout Creek. Now, you may not know it, but if you come to our college and look out the window, there's this beautiful creek called Trout Creek. And it looks kind of like this. And TRPA, Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, that's our local kind of organization, is considering rerouting it to decrease erosion. Explain the pros and cons in terms of erosion of increasing and decreasing f double prime of x. So first thing is very hard to find someone else who's already done this, so you're not going to be able to plagiarize. More importantly, everyone in our town gets it and they care. Your town probably doesn't care at all about Trout Creek, but I'm sure you can find things that are relative to your students that they care about. And this is something they care about. So here's something everyone cares about, but the good thing is, it's good and bad, is that it didn't happen last year, so they can't find last year's answer. The growth of the number of people, Y, in the population that have COVID-19 follows a logistics growth that is modeled by this differential equation. Explain the effect of K and L when the state goes from lockdown to fully open. So I try and bring things that are very relevant to our students and also timely because it keeps them from finding old answers. Good luck finding an answer from last year on this. Okay, hopefully in 5 years, no one will even care about this, but right now we do. And what you can do, again, if you can bring in examples that are meaningful for our students, then that really helps our assessments be authentic. So for exams, I'm using Proctorio, and that has all kinds of problems, but so does not using Proctorio have all kinds of problems. So I'm not gonna have the perfect solution, but I always make sure that there's a practice quiz or 2 of them before they take the high stakes quiz so that they're used to it. That helps a lot. I have an honesty statement. That's question number 1 on every test. They have to sign. Again, they have free Chromebooks, so there's no issue on that. And I also let students know that I'm the only one that sees their video, and I don't even look unless there's a red flag. So most of the time, I don't even look, so that you shouldn't, I tell my students, don't get so nervous about the video, because that's a big problem with Proctorio. So they get nervous. So you got to try and make sure they don't get so nervous. Let them know it's just you, and you probably won't even look, but you might. And some students are still stressed. This is not a perfect solution. So another solution I have is a group application project. So I have students form groups, 2 to 3 in a group. So they have to work together, and that's important. And then they can really have equity involved and be part of a culture. And they choose their own application that uses calculus. Okay, it doesn't look like this because it's on Zoom, but this seemed like a good picture. And they present it on Zoom. I only record it if they want it recorded because I don't want it to be stressful. But what it does is it makes it authentic and meaningful for them, and they get to choose the application. And that's the important thing. So that's my 15 minutes. I'm at 14 and a half. So if you have any ideas, you'll have time at the last part to answer any questions. I'm going to unshare my screen.
Thank you, Dr. Larry Green.
Let's see if I can-
We're now going to go ahead and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Jennifer Cole. And Dr. Jennifer Cole, you should be able to share or select to share screen. Let me know if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to get this to work. Okay, can you see just the one main slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be talking about authentic assessments in STEM and increasing equity. I've been invited to share some of my thinking about equity and authentic assessments in STEM. Since I teach earth and environmental sciences, my examples will come from those subjects, but I'm going to explain my thinking about and how I come to the decisions that fit my classes. So I hope that you'll be able to see potential modifications that will help you make authentic assessments and think about increasing equity in your disciplines. When designing my online courses and assessments, I am thinking about equity, inclusivity, and authenticity, specifically online. I'll talk about how I view different constraints, limitations, and opportunities in the online modality. And then I'll give a couple of examples about what I've been doing so far, but I definitely want to stress that this is all a work in progress, and I'm constantly, making changes and modifying and seeing how things work and what doesn't work. So I definitely don't want to suggest that you should kind of let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Like all little tweaks and changes that we can make to benefit our students and to increase equity are good changes. Okay, first, I've tried to take a hard look at my courses, thinking about what I really want to accomplish, any changes that I might want to implement into the courses. For some of my courses, I'm transitioning to them to online for the first time. So this is a good time to kind of make some tweaks and some changes. I want to think about how I can include all learners who happen to be in my classes. So this might include science and non-science majors. Students with various identities and backgrounds, students with various levels of comfort in the subject and in online modality. While thinking about this, I ask if there are data that might guide me in making some of these choices. I ask if I can be responsive to different cultural backgrounds, and I ask how I can be explicitly anti-racist and break down structures that oppress students of minoritized races and other minoritized identities. One tool that has been particularly useful to me is the Peralta Online Equity Rubric. And this is from the Peralta Community College District here in California. If you're familiar with the CVC OEI online course design rubric, the Peralta rubric is set up in a similar way. This quote is how the rubric defines equity for course design. So equity is freedom from bias or assumptions that negatively impact online learners' motivations, opportunities, or accomplishments. The rubric has multiple criteria that include things like technology, what Dr. Green was just talking about in thinking about how students are accessing our online content, student support, images, representation. This is just a picture of part of the first page of the online rubric. And here I've highlighted one criterion that I think is especially relevant to my thinking about online, authentic online assessments. So E7 says multiple course activities will require students to connect course content to their socio-cultural backgrounds and or the socio-cultural backgrounds of others. So this is a description of what an exemplary online course would have for this criterion. As I've been thinking about how to improve my online teaching and course design, I've considered these three questions. What do I want my students to come away with? What assessments will measure those outcomes? And what activities mirror authentic application of knowledge? This process is called backward design, and it gives me a framework for designing and implementing my teaching. So for example, some of my goals might be developing scientific habits of mind, or thinking about particular processes that are used in my discipline, or particular skills, or maybe I want to increase scientific literacy overall. I have a lot of choices of potential assessments. I could use quizzes and tests. I could use lab reports. I could use projects. I could use group work. So further considerations, how can I add more low stakes formative assessments that allow for slowly building up of knowledge? So these might be things like the practice problems and short quizzes and maybe even surveys. I want to think about how students can work together to build knowledge. So this might include things like discussions and peer review. And I also want to consider what would be appropriate in a synchronous class versus an asynchronous class. All of my online classes are asynchronous. I don't have any scheduled meeting times. So the kinds of ways that I can have students work together might be different than a class where you're having a collective Zoom meeting. I think about how technology will access this assessment. I can't guarantee that all of my students have access to a computer. So I want to look at the assessment. I want to look at the content and see what does this look like on the smartphone app. I want to think about removing potential barriers for completion. So for example, I want to think about what impacts having a timed test will have, or having an assessment that's only available for, has restricted availability. Or maybe I want to think about hard deadlines and late penalties. So my life is very different now than it was when I was sequestered with my students, protected in our classroom environment, and all sort of focused on one thing together. So I want to think about how life has maybe changed for my students as well. I want to think about how I'm going to grade. So I've embraced online rubrics. I think this is a really powerful grading tool, and it also helps to ensure that students can submit their best work. And I want to make sure that I'm making connections, making the assessments authentic, linking to careers that students might have in this discipline, or even just making links to the real world. A lot of times I've built this into the content and to the assessments that I was using in the face-to-face classroom, but I want to make sure that I'm making these connections explicit in the way that I'm presenting the assessments in the online modality, right? Like saying, we're doing this because, and maybe making a video to explain that, or embedding it otherwise in the assessment. Okay, so now I'm going to share some examples of assessments that I have included in my online classes. Discussions are one of my favorite types of online assessments. They can be so much more than just the icebreaker at the beginning of the semester. I've found that students are quite skilled in submitting replies to discussion prompts, as long as the discussion prompts are deliberately constructed and that there are really thorough instructions for what I want the students to do. Discussions encourage connections between students. Discussions develop thinking through interactions and can build up to higher stakes assessments. And discussions can offer an opportunity to give feedback before continuing on to a bigger assignment. So maybe you chunk out a project and you ask students to submit a small part of that project and get discussion feedback and maybe even feedback from their peers before moving on to the larger assignment. When assigning a discussion, there are some settings that you can consider. Do I want students to have to post first before viewing the posts of other students? Then I can allow them to reflect and reevaluate their thinking and post again after they've seen what somebody else has said. This gives them sort of a chance to develop their knowledge in consultation with their peers. Rubrics help with grading and with getting quality submissions. So this is an example of a discussion that I've used in my Intro to Earth Science class. So in this example, I'll have students watch a short video from TED-Ed about smartphones. Almost every student in my class has a smartphone, so there is an immediate connection to their lives. I ask them to make connections to Earth resources discussed in the video and environmental implications of resource extraction, so that I'm having students relate to the content that we've been learning about, specifically in this case about minerals and mining. Getting those metals and those other elements to put into the cell phone has implications beyond the environment, and the video also talks about how people, often people in colonized countries of the global south, are impacted by resource exploitation. And then I asked students to think about what they would do with an outdated smartphone. And this discussion really, people get really engaged and really think about the choices that they have in front of them and how those choices impact the environment and other people. Quizzes can be really stressful. I remember when I moved to California and I had to take the written driver's test over again. I had already been a licensed driver for decades, but I was really stressed going in to take that test. I did not want to fail my driver's test. I did not want to have to go back to the DMV. But quizzes can also be an opportunity to learn, and surveys and quizzes can be a method to assess knowledge leading up to another activity, so they can be formative rather than only summative. Sometimes I write quiz questions in a way that will guide students in a particular direction. So for example, I'll break down a problem into multiple smaller questions, and the first couple of parts will have maybe some real outlier options for the potential answers to select, but only one reasonable answer. Now I realize that what's reasonable to me might not be reasonable to a student, but if they know that I don't ever ask trick questions and that I encourage them to seek help before submitting a quiz, then there is an opportunity to learn there. Some important choices to make about settings. Are you going to allow retakes? Are you going to time the quiz? Are you going to use question banks or formula questions? And then what are you going to do with grading and feedback? So for example, maybe you want to just assess prior knowledge and you just mark a survey as completed rather than grade responses. So students sort of see what you're expecting them to get out of the assessment at the beginning and then also again at the end. I like projects for end of term assessments rather than exams. Summative projects can be used to build on content that I've already assessed in part throughout the term. I can ask students to work authentically in the discipline by using the same tools and databases and research skills that scientists use. And I can contextualize these assignments in order to increase personal relevance and make connections to the community. I rely heavily on detailed rubrics to guide students towards submitting their best work here. Some additional options to consider: Pre-submission review, peer review, and a dedicated discussion forum are ways to provide additional feedback for students and opportunities for improvements before submission or after submission. One example summative project is what I call an applied geography report. So I use this in my physical geography lab. The applied part means that they go out and do geography. I ask them to pick a location to observe all of the physical geography that we've been talking about over the term. I ask them to prepare by acquiring some data, including the weather forecast for the day that they're going to make their observations, the 7.5-minute topographic map for the location that they've selected. In pre-COVID days, students would often pick a park, but this really can be done from any place, from wherever they happen to be living. It might be more enjoyable to have a pretty location, but you can still use the content that you've been developing wherever you happen to be. I ask them to relate their observations to specific labs from earlier in the term, and students would often go with a family member or a child. And in their reports that summarize their observations, they would relate how good it felt to share their knowledge and to use specific terminology to describe the weather or the type of plants or the topography to someone else. And this is very personalized, and it gives students ownership of their knowledge and a deeper connection to their local environment. In closing, I want to say that I want everybody to succeed in my classes. My classes are not weed out classes. I don't believe in weed out classes. Weed out classes are often weeding out some groups of students more than others. The issues that I cover in my classes are intersectional. Everyone who lives in Los Angeles, where I am, will be affected when the big one eventually happens. The climate crisis is affecting all of us. Environmental pollution is affecting all of us. But it's also true that Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are disproportionately displaced by climate change and are more likely to live and work in polluted environments. So I see developing scientific literacy in my students as an act of social justice. And maybe some of my students will feel empowered to become scientists themselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Next, we're going to go ahead and have Dr. Rob Rubalcaba share his screen.
Well, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Rob Rubalcaba. I teach with Umoja. I just wanted to start off with my wonderful Umoja students. They're all taking mathematics with me in this picture. This is a wonderful, wonderful group of students. And I also have the honor of co-teaching alongside some really incredible faculty, mentors, and friends who aren't just my colleagues and teach in the classroom with me. And I'm a math teacher, but I'll go into their personal growth class with them, and I'll go into their English class with them and find out what they're learning in English, and then take that, so okay, they're learning about bell hooks or learning about activism, and then I'll take that activism into my math classroom with my students. But I'm really fortunate to be on this team and to have some really incredible students. And I wanted to share some different approaches that I have with STEM with them. But first, I want to start with the traditional portions in STEM. And I'm their panelists today who are talking about the norm not being, the standard operating procedure not being okay, right? Not being okay to just use this ordinary thing. Because we've seen what the standard operating procedure gives us, right? The system is doing exactly as it's designed, as it's intended, and into giving us very, very few students of color in our STEM majors graduating with PhDs and going on into and working in Google's and other places. That's exactly what the system was designed to do. So I'm not surprised when I see that. So we could either accept that system or we could change it. So I was listening to Ibram Kendi speak with Lamont Hill for Amend, and he was talking about what is it like to have liberated students? What is it like to have a free to have Black students succeed in a way that's free? But it's not enough to just to have them have the same math scores, because then when they go on to graduate and they're applying for this job that, let's say, for example, they're applying for Apple, right? Apple had their nice little Black Lives Matter protest thing on their next rollout of their next operating system, proceeded to be followed by an all-white cast of their engineers presenting their operating system and saying, oh, we really want to invest in our future Black engineers. Okay, so what happens when my student graduates and now is applying to your job that has that will be the only Black engineer in your company? Is that student going? How is that student going to feel? So a lot has to change. This article is talking about our community college system being a segregation machine, in particular remedial courses, developmental courses. So students who are most often are Black and Brown students, Indigenous students, get placed in the very lowest level of classes by a placement test that itself is racist. And you can see the results, right? You have a student who watched fewer and fewer classmates show up. Eventually he drops out too. And if you looking at studies of a system, right? When I first joined San Diego City College, I was really shocked to see how many classes were taught below transfer level and how few were at the transfer level. How come there's only 3 calculus classes, but there are a combined 95 math, 38, 30, 30, 34, 46, 96 classes, none of which actually are applicable toward a bachelor's degree. What ones are applicable toward an associate's, and it's by design, right? So you look at the 2-year study, only 1% of African American students and 2% of Latino students put at the very lowest level actually making out through an entry-level math class within 2 years. And thankfully we have an AB 705, which is out, which is kind of a band-aid for that, that allows students to be placed at the transfer level with some level of support. But it's not enough on its own. This number, I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of seeing 1% of Black and African American students achieving in STEM. You see that same number throughout, not just in math, but in other areas, like even just enrollment in big universities. You look at UCSD, there's only 2% of Black students there. Sometimes they actually have to round up to 2% just to get that number. So our first panelist talked about proctorio. I'm going to talk about it in a slightly different way through an experience of my Black and Brown students. And I also want to call to attention, there was also a mention in the question about students who have children in the room. And I also want us to consider the negative impacts and the trauma that video surveillance can have. That some of our students, a great number at my college, are homeless and do not wish to have their video, broadcasted to their professor to show that. Also, there are concerns of well, who gets watched? If you have 200 students, then how are you going to select who you're going to watch? Well, you could say, oh, I'm going to watch it if I have a red flag, but the software gives you all kinds of random red flags. It could be from looking to the left or to the right too many times, and it could be good because a sibling is knocking on the door. I kind of equate this software to a lie detector test. So I was top secret cleared for the Department of Defense for a number of years, and now this video is going to be deleted and somehow and whatever. But I was top secret cleared, and I had to go through a lie detector test, and it was a really horrible experience. You hook up a bunch of sensors to you, and all they asked is one simple question: have you conspired with a foreign government to stop U.S.? And it's like a clear no, right? But when you hook up a little bunch of monitors, monitor my heart rate, monitor my the number of times I move, like the sweat glands, all these different things, having cameras pointed at me. Do we want SWAT teams out in front of our students' houses while they're taking tests? Or do we want to check some other way that they are the ones taking the test? I definitely, I do agree. I absolutely do agree with our first panelist that's talking about, we don't want to, have privileged students, pay for their tests. Absolutely not. Absolutely. But in this talk, in this short time I have with you, I'm going to talk about alternative ways to getting to know your students and getting to know that they're the ones who are actually taking those assessments. So this young man is Alonzo, and his name is Alonzo Harvey. He is from Southeast San Diego. Also, before I go into Alonzo, just one more quick thing about Proctorio. A lot of this whole COVID era, there's a lot of things that are going on in students' homes that obviously they don't feel comfortable sharing, but that we haven't maybe thought about as educators, right? We're so used to our classroom being a safe space, right? We invite our students into this safe space, and now this safe space is really, really hard to cultivate because it now depends on all of their spaces, right? What's going on in their space? It might be that parents are yelling at each other, or that loved ones are abusing them. Domestic violence cases are skyrocketing in this era, and students, and I want to remind everyone that video surveillance is a form of domestic violence. So for those students who have gone through the trauma of a domestic violence, to add video surveillance on top of that could be really traumatic, and it could be something that cannot be undone, an undue trauma that cannot be undone. But going on to Alonzo, he's a future lawyer. He's moving on to Berkeley. He's in my class, and he just I want to share real briefly here with you just to listen to Alonzo talk, and you'll hear him explaining this math concept here. And I'm just going to quickly share this video here. So.
No matter what, you get your P, you don't even have to do the math no more, because now you know what the rules are. You get your P, my P is 0.3, and it's 5 choose, or let's just say it's 8 choose 2. Now what do? And your P is 3.
All right, so it was kind of brief, but just to see that experience of what it's like to have our students be not just a student taking a test, but a champion, a leader. And right after Alonzo shared his experience, his understanding, Tracy, who he's explaining it to, got to explain that concept to another student and got to smile. And both of them are leaving like happy, like they're happy to explain a math problem to somebody else, and it's empowering. It's also part of the support of the class as well. This another example of alternative and then sort of standardized assessments and then alternative. This is Amaris. Amaris was in my class. She failed algebra 5 times before taking my class, and the system that she was taking it in, I had 20% control of her grade. I didn't even make the test. They were brought to me in a sealed envelope that I opened up 15 minutes before class started, and it was all standardized, and all of the questions were timed at 1.8 minutes. And Amaris failed 5 times in a row, and then she was given a letter stating that she was unenrolled at SDSU, that we're sorry, you are no longer welcome here. She comes to my class, she appealed, and she said, I heard that you teach math differently. I really need to learn differently. And I said, absolutely. I brought her in, and I said, one thing I really need to share, I need to share the importance of this class with your classmates, because I cannot have you fail. You have to, and I don't even see the test. So we need to prepare you. I need you to come to my office hours, and I need you to choose 7 students in this classroom to help hold you accountable to come to those office hours. And so Amaris did. And one of the students that she chose to help make sure that she made it, because students go through life, right? They have all these things happening to them. But she comes to office hours. The student over here who's smiling and watching Amaris explain this math problem spent 3.5 hours crossing an international border just to make sure that Amaris made it to tutoring. That's how important Amaris' success was. It was very clear, not just from me, from her peers, and then eventually from herself. She started to believe in her own self so much. She got a 95% on her final exam. More importantly than that, she actually on her own decided to be an algebra pathways tutor for her high school students. So she is a graduate. She's a bachelor's from SDSU. She's going into a master's program, and she chose math. So I'm just so proud of her, and I got a chance to see her, and it's just like tears coming down my eyes, seeing from all of the struggles that she went through, all of the horror and struggles that she went through in our racist standardized system. and the benefits of what can happen when you do things hands-on. This young man, Eric, finished the standardized final exam again that I don't write as part of our department final in 1 hour. I'll go over that in a minute. Alternative ways to express and understand mathematical knowledge. So, math circles, cipher circles. I'm a DJ, so I paired up with the math dance professor, and we're doing circumferences of circles. And I'm asking the cipher participants around the circle, show me what happens if you increase the radius. And so they back away. Show me, show me what happens to decrease. We can do different things like, can you give me something where the area, can we get a rough estimate of the area of the circle that you're in, and have some fun while you're doing it. Hands-on. And I know that we think when we're teaching online through COVID that we can't have hands-on activities, and so many of our learners are hands-on learners. You can still do things hands-on and engage students to learn mathematics and through concepts through different ways, whether it's hands-on with little pipe cleaners or tortillas, right? You can be culturally relevant and say, all right, let's get some tortillas out and show me the tail of the distribution. And so Ari and Juan behind him are folding the tortilla to look at the tail of the distribution, so that we're going to be doing hypothesis tests here. And I asked Artie to show, can you please show me 80% confidence interval? So she looked and she folded it. That to me demonstrates understanding. And then from there, it gets her excited about the learning process. Other hands-on activities, being able to take something like this is from a pre-calculus class, being able to take, shapes and look at irrational numbers through folds of paper. More hands-on activity. This is just using balloons. I actually had a student in this class who was blind, and legally blind, had an assistant animal, a working animal in the classroom, and how am I going to teach this student online when the student can't see, right? Through a computer screen. So hands-on ended up being really vital. And my student shared that it was actually the hands-on really helped bridge to the online world, even though the online world seemed very scary. Tests, assessments, they need to be celebrations. And not to ruin the word celebration, right? You don't want to people no, I'm not celebrating my birthday no more. I hate that word. I don't ever want to celebrate nothing again, right? No, have them really honestly celebrate, right? When you have learning at the center of their being, something that they want to learn math more than they want to breathe air, they get so excited at understanding the math, and it is a real celebration. More celebration. This is students, they're preparing videos to record. So I have them record videos of themselves talking about a problem, and here they are doing it in teams. So obviously with this new online environment, it's harder. It's a little, they can still do teams, they just have to record individually. And I also respect that some students don't want to be recorded at all. And so we just do audio or something different. But some students that do want to, they're excited about sharing their knowledge with other students. And I also have them do it in different languages. So I'll have students do these kind of assessments in different languages as well. I don't see it right here. I'll just trying to find it and I don't see it. Also, assessment. So this student, Monica, who's sitting down in the library, she was hurt. A lot in STEM, I find so many educators find it casual to dismiss a question by demeaning students and saying, well, that's a bad question, or, oh, you should. In Monica's case, they told her that she should have learned this question in the first grade. That she comes to me with her textbook in tears, telling me that I need to give this to a student who could use it because she's dropping out. And I told her, absolutely not. You're going to do fine in my class. And my student, my peer tutors were there too, and we all encouraged each other. And Monica honestly encouraged me to be a better teacher. And this picture is from Thanksgiving break. Before one of the students was Thanksgiving break, and she decided she became a tutor. So she decided that she actually wants to be a math teacher, that she had a traumatizing experience and traumatizing experiences in mathematics. And now she understands it. She wants everybody else to understand it. And more importantly, she wants students that look like her to know that they can be math majors too. here she is at UCSD, the UCSD library, tutoring another student who was really, really scared about her final exam. And Monica said, no, I got you. Let's pull up to the library together. We'll work on this until the library closes, and I want, because I want to see you pass. When you include students, when you get to know about them and you find out what their interests are, then you can have your students being excited and celebrating STEM in this way as well. I was just contacting a student today who's going to be joining City College, and I saw her last 2 years ago in the summer, and she hated math. And I mean, like, absolutely hated math. She would walk out of the classroom and, like, oh, it's math time. I'm just going to skip it. And I talked to her, I said, what's going on? She goes, I don't care about no math. I just care about my community. It's like, well, if you care about your community, do you want to know about data that is collected on your community as far as like voter turnout rates? And she goes, oh yeah, I care about that. Well, okay, well, let's go back inside the classroom and let's talk about it. And I was so excited to hear today that she actually wants to be a civil engineer. She said that after I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years, she said after that summer that she felt so celebrated that she actually went into her math classroom and said, I get all of this, I want to do more. And one last thing I'll leave us with is one small thing that you can do. I know a lot of this sounds like, well, it might not sound like something that you could do, because it might seem like it takes a lot of time, but it does. Support is really important for our students, but so is believing in them. So is investing in them. And one small thing that you could do in your classroom, instead of you calling their names, I have my students say their name. Hi, my name is Denise, and I am a future elementary school teacher. So they don't just get a sense of belonging, they belong. And that's so important for our students of color, myself included, when I was working in industry, when I was working in the United States Defense Department. And again, this video probably will be self-destructing after me saying that, but after being in the United States Defense Department, I was one of a handful of people of color with a PhD in mathematics, and out of hundreds. And there's a very clear imposter syndrome that I had, both going through university and graduate school, and especially in the workplace. And when you say that you want your students to have a sense of belonging, that's not what I'm interested in at all. I don't want my students to have a sense of belonging. I'm so honored to be mentored by Doc Rivera, who mentioned this to me. So thank you, Doc, if you're listening. Doc was saying, you don't want family members to have a sense of belonging. You want them to belong. You need them to belong. And when your students belong in your classroom, the things that they do will it's magic. They'll tell you, oh, I'm not interested in math. I don't like math at all. And then you'll see them doing 14 steps problems with ease, excited to share with each other how to do, is the next one going to be 15 steps? Or are we going to do a 20-step problem? Like, oh, okay, I'm there, I'm down. What's next? So the sky's the limit. When you empower and embolden and embrace your students and get to know them, love on them, care for them, believe in them, there is nothing holding them back. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Larry, Jennifer, and Rob, for sharing and demonstrating the importance of using equity-based authentic assessments in math and science. Your work highlights the need for us to center social justice and anti-racism practices in our disciplines as we navigate these pandemics of COVID and racism. Our students really need for us to be equity-minded now more than ever. That being said, now we'd like to learn from the brilliance in the room. We're going to move into our chat activity, where we are asking you all to share some of your ideas with us. How do you use strategies in your daily practice? How do you make equity visible in authentic assessments in your daily practice? And just feel free to share some examples, or if there are some things that you learned from our panelists that you will be using in your daily practice as well. So take a moment and just share this information with us in the chat.
And also, I see a question about polling them to see if they're ready. For me, I gauge that based off of their questions and their excitement, and their nervousness. Right. Sometimes they're like, just a word exam or quiz or check-in. Even now they're like, oh, it's a check-in. That's like bad, right? They're to kind of transform that nervous energy into say, nervousness is okay. It's like, it's like being nervous before a talk, right? It means that you care about it, right? Confusion, that means that you want to learn more, right? That's okay. Once we get over those kind of like negative sort of associations with assessments, and then I'll give them a window. When we were in a physical classroom, I would say, okay, anybody who's ready to knock out the test now, go for it. Does anybody want an extra day to study? And they'll say, sure. I said, but if you're going to use that extra day, I want to see you spending like hours on those sample exams, right? I know you might have seen them before and dabbled with it, but if I'm going to give you an extra day, the whole class an extra day, I want to see everybody working on them samples together. And they're like, okay. And they'll be working on them samples. You'll see logs going until 3 a.m. working on those problems.
Okay, I see some things being added in the chat. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Cynthia Ira says she introduced her intro to bio assignments includes species worksheets. And part of that worksheet is to include cultural importance of the species. Nice, nice. Jennifer Cole says she loves the idea of using household objects for home-based hands-on activities. Really important with everyone being online right now. Let's see, what else do we have? The use, Susan Bigford says, the use of detailed, clear rubrics gives each student the ability to assess their work before submitting. The goalpost is the same for everyone. That removes the arbitrariness of grading for both the student and the teacher. Great. And there are more comments here. Please feel free to share how you use authentic assessments or what you may take back with you to use from what you've learned today. Okay. Susan loves rubrics. So do I. Rubrics are great. And let's see, Avid says, I like to give them group projects because I believe they learn a lot from each other. I also like to use the discussion feature of Canvas. Great.
Yeah, and Larry was talking about group projects as well. I don't about having each of them work on something. I know those projects are really important. They get to you get to do some real stuff and have students actually work with each other. And I think especially in nowadays with the whole COVID environment, a lot of students feel isolated, and so they're isolated and they're they really want to be around their classmates physically, or they can't. And so group projects give a way for them to still stay in contact with each other and actually do something meaningful with the class.
Absolutely. And we know that learning is indeed social, especially with African American and Latinx students and other cultures. And we know that our students definitely benefit when there is peer-based learning involved in group learning that happens. Karen here says that she does a final poster presentation using pages. Each student has a page on a biology issue of their choice, which is scaffolded throughout the semester. Then they have a poster session where she breaks them into rooms and they share their poster. Cynthia also says that she will do more on terms, both scientific and regular, at the beginning of the module. And Sean here shares that for his history and rock and roll class, he assigns a project for students to interview someone on their personal experiences with the music they grew up with. Nice. And he says that they're able to hear history from the most authentic sources. These are wonderful examples. Thank you so much for sharing this. Okay, so now, is there anything else? If not, then we're going to have Jessica share information with you around the tools that @ONE and the tools and resources offered by @ONE and CVC OEI. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Arnita. Yes, so today, again, we're really talking about the different options, right? And different ways to really look at authentic assessments and consider, right, incorporating a lot of what we're talking about today in your courses. And so I want to make reference to some resources that are already out there for you to access. And so with that, I'm going to take you to the first resource, which is through our colleagues from @ONE. They've actually developed what they call Pocket PD. So they're, I don't know if some of you are familiar with @ONE, but they provide professional development for our CCC system. And tons of faculty love @ONE for all of the different courses and professional development opportunities that they provide. And part of what they've created, which are called Pocket PDs, which are smaller bit size or short professional development opportunities, they've created these guides, and one in specific is for authentic assessment. So I want to make sure I take you to their website to show you how to get to that resource. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to go ahead and take you to the website so that you can take a look at where you can find these Pocket PD guides. So we will include the link in the chat so that you can quickly access that. So once you get to the @ONE website and click up here for the Pocket PD options, you'll then scroll down to guides. And when you get there, you'll notice the different topics that they have available. Today, we are talking about the Authentic Assessment Guide. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. There we go. And then you'll notice it's a very easy, practical way to just go through the content. It's different slides. It's a slide deck that you can go through and take a look at the wonderful information that they've put together. So I wanted to make sure to take you there so you can see it. I'm not going to review the information right now, but I just wanted to make sure that you are all aware that this resource is available. The second resource that I want to highlight is also our website. So the CVC OEI website is available. You'll notice that we've created some changes due to COVID-19. We really noticed a high increase in traffic coming through our website because, of course, right, we're all looking for resources on how do we transition from on-ground to online instruction. And so a lot of our faculty members, staff members, even our students are going to our websites to find resources. And so I want to make sure that you have the link also to this particular resource. It is the online instruction and services resources. So depending on what role you play on your campus, this is a wonderful space to come in and take a look at the different options that are available to you. And so just want to make sure that those links are provided there as well. Okay, any questions regarding that? Please feel free to include those in our Q&A or our chat there. So I'm going to bring you back to our slides. The next thing I wanted to highlight is we did put together what we call an authentic assessment submission form. Just like the activity that we talked about today, and Arnita just facilitated this activity quickly, we want to also take a moment to follow up with you, right? We're going to provide the link in the chat as well so you can have access to the smart sheet. Sorry, the smart sheet is intended to collect ideas and examples from all of you, from the audience. Feel free to share it with your colleagues as well. If you know someone who is creating authentic assessments, who's really dedicating some time to you know, create these examples, if they are willing to, they can fill out this submission form, and this will then get compiled as a resource to the rest of your colleagues in our CCC system. We do have, again, that site on cvc.edu on our website, and we will definitely include those resources there. Sharing is caring, right? And the more examples we have, the more ideas that are presented, the better it's going to be for our system and our faculty to have access to more ideas and to collaborate. So we highly would appreciate and encourage you to fill out this form. You don't have to do it right now. Definitely take some time, and again, feel free to share that with your colleagues. Awesome. So I'll hand it over to Arnita. Arnita, can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about that. So, okay, so we'll have just a couple of minutes for Q&A. We've had some Q&A happening in the Q&A section here, as well as some questions in the chat. So I think we'd like to just pose a couple of questions for the panelists to answer. Would that be okay now?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. How do you ensure students are taking the exam if you aren't using Proctorio?
Yes, I saw that question, and I think that's a great question. And one thing that I would say to that is before my assessment, I have them work together on the samples, and I get to hear them each individual, either in a collective Zoom session or individually. If they're not able to make it, I'll reach out to them and talk, and just have them walk me through a problem that they're working on the pre-assessment, and to ensure that they're understanding what's going on, and also that they have questions, right? I know my students are doing their own work when they have questions on the really challenging questions, right? So that's a big part of it. What really got me that confidence, and what really made me not want to use the tool, besides hearing what students were going through, what traumatic experience they were going through, was really seeing how I was able to bring questions into their understanding, like having a safe space for those questions, because it's not just enough to say, okay, so tell me if you have questions. When you have a safe space for students to say, I just don't get it, I really don't get it, I'm stuck on this problem, to just say that, to be honest about it, to be open, honestly, have an honest discussion with two-way, both your students and yourselves, and for other students to see that safety and go, oh, you know what, I could say I don't understand this either. Well, that's great, that's exactly what I need to know. Let's go ahead and learn this a different way. And so once you have that dialogue, it's a lot easier.
Okay.
Oh, Larry or Jennifer, do you want to add anything to that? We do have another question.
I mentioned I use Proctorio, so I'm not the best person to answer to that one, except for the formative assessments, and that's a whole different thing. Then it doesn't matter. It's all about just learning, not assessing.
Yeah, I guess I can pipe in. I don't use Proctorio. I also don't check my students' IDs in my physical classroom, so I'm not quite sure exactly who's in my classroom anyway. I've just kind of taken the philosophy that I'm going to trust my students, and that my job is to help guide students who are there who want to learn, and to give my full attention to them. And it's possible that maybe some sort of bad apples might slip through, but I choose not to focus on that, and I choose to, sort of just develop an inclusive learning environment and a supportive learning environment, and hope that that I gain trust, and that I build community that way.
Great. So this is just another question about Proctorio, about when students are being flagged. How do you handle that, or what kind of reaction do you take towards the flagging?
So I'm probably the best to answer that one because I actually use Proctorio. The good thing about Proctorio, and actually my class is not really Proctorio, is I get to know my students. So if it flags, I look at the test first. I don't even bother looking at the video, and you can kind of see a flag on the test itself without Proctorio. I mean, if it doesn't sound like them, then it's not them, for example. And the great thing is I don't need to, because I have communication, I have trust with my students. They understand I'm using Proctorio, which means I can see them. I actually didn't look at any videos last term at all for any of my classes because I didn't need to. But having it there really made a difference in terms of them not even thinking about cheating. And that was the whole, and I tell my students that. I say, look, I probably won't ever look at you, but it's only if there's a problem.
Great, thanks. How are these activities adapted to distance education? some of the examples that you mentioned?
I guess I can start with that. Activities with distance education. I think when we first went online, I never taught an online class before, and I was terrified. I was terrified of losing my students. All of my colleagues were talking about Canvas and iPads and this program and that program, and I paused and I looked into my heart and I asked myself, why am I teaching? And it's because I care so much about my students and that I love them, and my focus just became on that. And I found ways, and my students found ways. I said, because we did so much stuff, we did so many activities hands-on in our classroom. How do we do that online? And my students, I always like pass out materials like, flex pipe cleaners and paper to fold. And my students just brought out napkins, and I said, okay, I want to like take a function and find the inverse by folding. What can we use? And I just let them take the lead. And they said, oh, can we use sriracha? Sure. Okay, cool. Oh, somebody said, oh, can I use eyeliner, or can I use ketchup or mustard? Sure, go whatever you got, whatever you want to use. You want whatever little square piece of paper, or if you want to make a paper into a square, go for it. And they helped me find ways and themselves find ways to be engaged and still hands-on, even though it's through a computer screen and a camera. And once I stopped asking, like, how can I even do this? The students already had solutions to do it. They were already like, oh, hey, didn't we used to dance to like do the shifts of the function? Can we still do that? Yeah, we can still do that.
Let me chime in a very different way. This is brand new, but I'm a programmer. I'm a big coder, and I've made games, computer games, because our students, especially the younger students, they love playing computer games. So I make, shoot down the dollars to make the regression equation be the right equation, that kind of thing. And I turn it into a video game and make it fun for them. So it's hands-on virtual. And that works also. And I make sure that it is completely formative. So if they lose the game because they're already coordinated, I could never do well in my games, actually, because I'm terrible at video games. But there's no stress, but they learn a lot, and that's really what matters.
Great. Oh, our last question is a two-part question. Is there something similar to My Open Math for biology, and is My Open Math ADA compliant?
Let me speak to the ADA compliant first. We actually had the OERI hire a specialist to look at My Open Math. And the one thing is they found it's actually more compliant than the publisher sites. Is it perfect? No. So when you have something that does have something that's not necessarily compliant, you have to have a plan B. But the good news is all the equations, all the graphs, those are compliant. So it's pretty good. It's as compliant as it gets out there. And we're all doing our best, and we've been looking at that as we're creating problems. Make sure every problem we create is compliant. Some of them that other people created are not necessarily compliant, and then you have to be careful. So that was the My Open Math. I'm not that familiar with the biology with My Open Math. I'm not sure if you need My Open Math for biology, because biology doesn't have those fancy equations that math has. I don't think so. I'm not a biologist, so maybe I'm wrong about that. My guess is you can probably just use Canvas quizzes, no? But I'm not sure. I'm not a biology person.
I'll just chime in. I'm not a biologist either, but I do have many biology colleagues in my science division at West, and perhaps the question was more about just OER for biology in general, as opposed to the math quiz questions. Like, so with OER, maybe, there are textbooks, but then there are also sometimes supporting information like practice quizzes and things that go along with a textbook. And I don't know a lot about biology in particular, but a couple of resources that you might check out include oercommons.org, and Merlot is another potential resource where you might find some useful biology free online materials, supporting materials in addition to textbooks. So I'm not sure if that helps, but it's a place to start.
There's also an OER listserv where you ask, and pretty much all the OER enthusiasts, including myself, in the country, look at it and will answer if there is something. And you pretty much will always get the answer. I do the creation, not the creation, the compilation of the listservs and put it into areas. And I created the website for that. So that's another good place to, if you can't find anything, you can ask. And there's a nice national place to ask.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I have one quick request. Would each of the panelists, would each of you mind just sharing one takeaway, one thing you'd like for our participants to take with them, to use in their daily practice or to share with their campus communities? Just one thing. And
one is so hard. I guess I'll go first. One thing I really want us to take away from is just believing in your students. That so many of our students, at least with in particular regards with math, have had traumatizing experiences or completely unengaging experiences, and they don't see themselves as a math student. They see themselves as just somebody like that they see math as an obstacle. And when you believe in them, when that belief is not surface level, but from your own heart, and they know it, and you demonstrate it by giving real support and encouragement, and believing in their success, that you get to see students just completely transform into all kinds of wonderful things. They started off saying, "Oh, I'm an English major," because they literally did an optimization problem to minimize the number of math classes they have to take to graduate, so they're going to be an English major, but they don't like English. Okay, what do you really want to do? I really want to be a nurse. Okay, well, believing in them, achieving that goal is so important, even though they might not believe in themselves getting through this math class. And when that connection is real, when Ifra finally realized, week 14, that my belief in her was absolutely 100% genuine, she took off and started tutoring the whole class, got a 95% on her department final, and she is a nursing major now. She's taking extra math classes just because she knows she can do it. So really believe in your students, really believe in them, and you'll see wonderful, amazing things.
Maybe I can say the next one. It's kind of similar, but a little different wording. Care. So listen to what your students' experiences are. A lot of them, especially in math, have been damaged, as in somebody did something bad to them, whether that was a teacher or a co-student or a family member, whatever it was, and you have to be there for them and let them know that you're here. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to give you some advice, places to look, ways to get help, ways to work with others, and to learn this stuff so you can get through when you can get through.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry.
Those two things are great. I agree wholeheartedly. And I guess the thing that's driving me right now is recognizing how different life is, particularly right now. So I know we are talking about online education in general, but we're also talking about online education in, the pandemic of COVID-19 and the pandemic of anti-Black racism and the pandemic of, kleptocracy and whatever. So I would just say, try to have reasonable expectations and try to be really flexible, because what students could do when their children were in a safe classroom and they had time to be in your classroom with you for 3 hours in a lab or, whatever, in that, as Rob mentioned earlier, sort of that safe space, is really different now. And it's, you know, and it's really different even for me. I have my kids are at home. I'm now a homeschooler and, you know, an online teacher. And so I feel like my big takeaway is to just be adaptable, be flexible, and be compassionate and be caring and be supportive, and remind them that we're all here together and we're all here for the same thing, for the students to succeed.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So 3 great takeaways: believing in our students, listening to our students, being there for them, letting them know that you're there for them, and having reasonable expectations and flexibility, recognizing how different life is for our students right now, particularly in light of COVID and the disproportionate impact that our students are experiencing as a result of COVID. So again, I just want to say thank you to Larry, Jennifer, and Rob for sharing all of your wonderful information with us, your expertise, and again, for highlighting the need to center social justice and anti-racism practices in STEM. This has been really, really informative and wonderful. And I believe that Jessica's going to come in and talk a little bit about the Zoom webinar poll and some next steps. And then we'll say our goodbyes.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to have had this opportunity to put this webinar together for all of our panelists, all of our colleagues. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for taking time to be here. Karen, I believe, can you start the poll? If you can all take a moment to give us some feedback, this would be really helpful to us as we continue to plan more webinars to provide. And just different topics. And so we'd really appreciate your feedback in this poll. And then next steps, we will follow up with a thank you email for attending. We will provide you also a link to the recording of this webinar. It is going to be closed captioned, so please give us some time to finish that and get that together for you. We do have a link that will be provided. It is actually, it's already in the chat. So if the video recording will live on the YouTube channel, the @ONE YouTube channel. So you will be able to access all of our webinars there, our new webinars, our older webinars. If you've missed any of them, you can definitely go on there and take a look. So again, we appreciate your time. And as we wrap up the poll, I don't know, Dr. Robert Rubalcaba, if you want to play a little song for us to wrap this up.
Definitely, we want to give a shout out to our resident DJ, as well as to Mike for doing the closed captioning. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, Karen, for handling everything behind the scenes for us. And again, Jennifer, Larry, and Rob, this has been just absolutely wonderful, and hopefully we'll get to share more with you down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was really great speaking with both of you, Larry and Jennifer. Thank you so much. It was great.
This was a great experience working. To me, my heart is in this, and it's just helping our students and making sure that they all can succeed. That's the most important thing.
Thank you for loving our students. Yeah. Take us out, Dr. Rob.